For local Palestinians, they say their people don't have to watch for bullets and bombs, cutting them down at every turn. But so much of Gaza is now in ruins, and starvation is a daily struggle for so many of the survivors.
There is a sense of relief that we don't have to watch in horror and helplessness as we're seeing our families and friends and our people back home being slaughtered. Everyone who is complicit in the genocide of Palestine needs to be held accountable for this. They have taken out complete family lines out of Gaza that just do not exist anymore. I don't foresee that there will be stability in the region because the other party is not interested in that.
However, some, like CAIR Maryland's director, had some reservations about the peace plan. Zainab Chaudhry says she was cautiously optimistic Israel would keep their end of the bargain, freeing roughly 2,000 Palestinians.
Because we also know that there have been multiple ceasefire proposals on the table over the last several months.
Chaudhry says it's been an unimaginable 2 years watching the events in the Middle East. She says this picture shows several family members of Maryland residents killed in Gaza.
We pray and hope that the Palestinian people will find a way to move forward, and they have inspired the world with their strength and their hope and their faith.
She hopes for peace for Israel and Palestine, but adds the Israeli government must be held accountable as the UN Commission says Israel has committed genocide in the Gaza Strip.
But there needs to be justice as well. When we talk about peace, lasting peace in the region, we need to make sure that there is accountability.
Now, Chaudhry adds she and the organization are calling on Congress members, I should say, to sponsor and support a bill that would block the president from sending war weapons to Israel.
I think the cautious optimism is really sort of the emotion of the day for my community. Is we are really hopeful that the Palestinian people of Gaza will be able to come back and rebuild and recover. But we are also saying this should not have happened in the first place.
Veronica Lazier with CAIR Oklahoma says this first step to ending violence is more than welcomed. But it's exactly that, a first step.
Not just the physical rebuilding of homes and shops and hospitals and schools, it's also the emotional rebuilding of our Palestinian, friends and neighbors across the world have to rebuild their lives with entire branches of their family having been completely obliterated.
Muslim and Palestinian Minnesotans are also reacting. Jelani Hussein with the Council on American Islamic Relations in Minnesota says this moment brings cautious optimism for a lot of people.
That's why many people are hopeful that this comes to an end for the families who are waiting for their hostages to return, and for the countless Gazans who are hoping that bombs are not going to drop and starvation is not going to continue.
Executive Director of the Cleveland Council on American Islamic Relations says she's hopeful that the ceasefire can provide some immediate relief to those living in Gaza, but says even if the ceasefire holds, there's a long road ahead.
We know that this is not the end. We can't take a deep breath and say, okay, well, it's over. We know that it's not over. We know that it's going to still continue. The only way that it can be over is if the international community basically says, hey, Israel, you committed war crimes, and now you need to disarm, and you need to pay for justice.
We are concerned that as Palestinians return home, there is nothing to return home to except more dead bodies, and that if aid is not committed to and moved quickly, the conditions will not get better.
So the Council on American Islamic Relations released this statement. It says, we welcome news that hostages on both sides are returning to their families. Every life freed as a reminder of what becomes possible when the bombing stops.
Was there any relief that there might be some end to at least this phase?
There is always relief when there is relief to the people.
Tala Ali is regional organizer with the Council on American Islamic Relations, CAIR. She says whatever positives are made, they are only a step toward permanent solutions.
Until occupation and illegal annexations and settlements and hostages can be addressed, then there is no road to peace.
One leader with the Council on American Islamic Relations in Philadelphia says there is relief in seeing a ceasefire and some 1,900 Palestinians imprisoned by Israel being released. But he says there are still thousands to mourn in Gaza after 2 years of conflict.
I saw reports today about people are saying we came back to nothing and complete destruction. And they couldn't even recognize their neighborhoods. Like, buildings are gone, everything is gone.
Amat Teklioglu with CAIR in Philadelphia told me he is also hopeful that the United States, as well as many of the international partners involved in this ceasefire, will find ways to hold Israel accountable for actions they say went too far during this conflict in their retaliatory campaign, as well as ensuring that the terms of the ceasefire are respected.
Executive Director of the Michigan chapter for the Council on American Islamic Relations.
We welcome that there is a temporary ceasefire and captives and detainees have been returned and will be getting medical treatment.
However, he's skeptical about the prospect of long-term peace.
There's nothing in the peace deal that talks about anything relating to Palestinian self-determination. And in reality, as long as the illegal occupation continues and the Israeli government is involved in land expansion, and not just relating to Gaza, but the West Bank and Lebanon and Syria, we don't see how there can be a sustained peace.
Well, so I want to bring in CAIR Chicago Executive Director Ahmed Rahab to speak a little bit more about the history that was made. And thank you for your time. I want to say that first and foremost.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on.
I certainly appreciate.
While we're happy that the killings have stopped, that this isn't the end of the story. There needs to be accountability. At the end of the Holocaust, we didn't all just walk away and shake hands with Germany. There had to be Nuremberg. And so there has to be the Hague War Crimes Tribunals. And everybody who was involved in the mass murder of 67,000 civilians, including 20,000 children, needs to be held accountable per international law, including the presidents of the United States, Joe Biden and Donald Trump, who at the Knesset boasted about giving weapons to Netanyahu to use on the Gazans, and quote unquote, he said he used them well. That's an admission of guilt and complicity in the said genocide in Gaza. So it's not the end of the story as far as we're concerned. Furthermore, there has to be an end to occupation, apartheid, and there needs to be a Palestinian state. So up until we get to that point, what we have now is just a first step, and certainly nothing to celebrate as being the end of the story, or in the headlines, peace has been resolved and brought in. It's just the beginning.
Yes.
I think the root causes of this problem need to be addressed and resolved. When President Trump cynically states that we've had peace for the first time in 3,000 years, it really underscores that he understands very little about this problem in the Middle East. It didn't start on October 7th. It started in the 1940s, 47, 48, when the State of Israel was unilaterally announced and they declared independence from the British. And at that point, there was a mass displacement of Palestinians and uprooting from their ancestral homeland. And it kept on going. Now the West Bank itself has hundreds of thousands of illegal settlers there that are completely backed by the Israeli state, and they're violent and they're targeting civilians. We've seen what happened in Gaza, the genocide, but before that, it was the largest open prison in the world. And so the future remains dire unless these root causes are addressed, and there can only be peace if the humanity of Palestinians is acknowledged, and the right to self-determination, and the right to dignity, life, and prosperity, along with the Israelis. We cannot only see the humanity of one side. You know, the rhetoric has talked about Israeli families, but not Palestinian families. It's talked about the hostages, as in the Israeli hostages held in Gaza, but not the Palestinian hostages in tens of thousands held in Israel. And so we cannot continue in this lopsided type of approach to the problem and expect it to be resolved just because we have the might and we have the weapon. And so these tens of thousands of individuals, including 20,000 children, have been murdered in cold blood in ways that shouldn't have happened. This wasn't about self-defense. This was about mass punishment, which is illegal under international law. And for the most part, the world watched as it happened live on our phone screens and television screens. And it's very, very sad. This whole human shields language is part of the language of dehumanization that is set forth into the world by the Israeli propaganda machine that we call the Hasbara, propaganda. And it's part of the reason why they were able to get away with this genocide, is that they managed, for the most part, for a great part, to dehumanize Palestinians, suggesting that their mothers are not normal mothers, their fathers are not normal fathers, that they put their children up as human shields for attention. What attention, I don't know. No attention ever came. No salvation ever came. It all makes no sense. And the other problem is that you're saying there's sort of a line between the Palestinian people and Hamas. Well, there isn't one between the Israeli people and their government. They elected their government. They voted for their government. It's a democratically, quote unquote, elected government. And so this genocide, sadly, doesn't only bring into question the government itself, but the entire Israeli society that backed this government in this genocide as it played out live. And bar a minority of Israelis, and this has to be said to give credit where credit is due, that were very loud and very defiant against this genocide, sometimes to their personal detriment. For the most part, Israeli society, the religious establishment, the political establishment, the media establishment, really supported this heinous mass punishment of Gazans that amounted to genocide and ethnic cleansing. And so there's a large question right now for me and for many Americans, including Jewish Americans, about the future of Israeli society with that sort of massive burden weighing on their legacy moving forward, and whether they can ever be normalized again in international community. But what I do know is that these human rights violations that have happened, there has to be accountability for them. And to make it very simple to understand for your viewers, imagine if it were in the reverse. Imagine if it were Palestinians who decimated 80% of Israel and killed 67,000 Israelis, innocent Israelis, and 20,000 Israeli children. Imagine if the conversation would be so technocratic and bureaucratic at this point in time. Certainly it wouldn't be. And so that double standard is something we have to confront. And I understand there's power and no power. There's the haves and the have-nots, and that's just the way the world works. But those of us who believe in the inherent right to all humans to dignity, to accountability for them, to dignity, to life, to justice, cannot stand for that. And we must keep, pushing back on that narrative and the attempt to normalize this heinous evil act that happened over 2 years. It will go down in history as an act of evil. And in this moment, I want to register my voice on the side of those who see it as such and who call it out as such.
Now joining us is Hussam Aylouch from the Council on American Islamic Relations. Mr. Aylouch, are you there?
Yes, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. Okay, so in addition to the hostages, Israel will release some 2,000 Palestinian prisoners. How much do you know about them and their conditions?
Well, let's start by using the right terms. It is not fair to use hostages when we're talking about Israeli captives and then talk about prisoners when we're talking about Palestinians, because Israel has been holding thousands and thousands of Palestinians, many of them with no trial, and that includes many minors, many women. People have nothing to do and never been charged with anything. And by the way, many of them have been held way long before October 7th. So let's call both hostages or both captives to be fair.
Okay. That is a fair point. All right, how confident are you that this ceasefire will hold and the Palestinians returning home will do so without worries about Hamas or the Israeli defense?
Sure. I mean, it seems President Trump is putting his weight behind it, so I'm a little bit more hopeful. I'm like many of us, we're very happy to see captives, innocent people going back to their families, whether they're Israeli or Palestinians. They don't deserve to be kept away from their loved ones. The challenge is that we could have reached that 2 years ago. There was no need for a genocide. There was no need for 70,000 Palestinians to be killed. There was no need for 20,000 Palestinian children to be killed, 20,000 more amputated. But the politics of the region, the politics of Netanyahu, my worry is that as soon as President Trump gets busy somewhere else, Netanyahu has no reason to keep peace because he knows he's going to be pushed out of politics. He will be held accountable for a lot of charges, corruption charges he's dealing with. So unfortunately, until we deal with the root cause of the problem, the root cause of, first of all, we probably need to hold accountable those responsible for the genocide. But also, we need to deal with the root cause of the problem, and that is the occupation. the occupation that existed before October 7th, before even Hamas or PLO came to existence. Palestinians, like all people in the world, deserve to live free on their own land. They deserve self-determination. They deserve to have their Palestinian state once and for all.
So it sounds as if you might be a little circumspect that this deal will come to full fruition.
I'm hopeful that at least this will be a cessation of fire. I mean, I'm happy to know that there are no missiles, unfortunately, U.S.-supplied missiles, falling on the people of Gaza today. That today parents can hug their children and not worry that next day they might not be alive. But I don't see it as a long-term solution until we address the long-term root causes of this situation, this tragedy today, and that is Israel's refusal to allow Palestinians to have their own self-determination and state. Israel's refusal to end the occupation. Israel's refusal to end the illegal confiscation of Palestinian land, to build on them illegal, racist settlements for Jews only, on Palestinian land. We're not talking about inside of Israel. These are the West Bank. This is the place where a Palestinian state is expected to be established, a state that has been recognized by the overwhelming majority of the world, except our country, unfortunately.
All right, Mr. Aylouch, from the Council on American Islamic Relations.
Listening to these clips, do they sound pacified to you? They sound like they're trying to resume fighting. They want accountability, reparations, war crimes charges, and Nuremberg-style trials, but no mention of Hamas or October 7th at all. They want a state. Palestine is a state. They publish reports on their economy, which relies heavily on things like foreign aid and overseas remittances. Palestine is a state, a failed state, a terror state, but that's what they want. Along with a state, they want to end the occupation, that is Israel. They are afraid now of losing the narrative and are trying to act as if October 7th never happened or admit that Hamas is a war crime. They are allowed to do this on TV, completely unchallenged. Hamas is here, ladies and gentlemen, and their public relations division is the Council on American Islamic Relations.
Are you there?